My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with Mary Nassiff, a lifelong Cedar Rapidian with a rich history of Lebanese Syrian culture. Mary, tell us when and where you were born.
I was born here in Cedar Rapids, December 31st, 1970.
What was your dad's name?
His name was Sam Slayman.
And your mother?
Selma Alice Federa George.
Did either of them immigrate?
They both did. They both did.
When did your dad come to this country?
I think my father came as a very young man in 1905. He came to be with his brother, who was a supplier for peddlers here in Cedar Rapids. He was a half-brother on his father's side.
What was your half-brother's name?
His half-brother's name was Sam Kasseri. They had the same mother, but not the same father.
Okay.
The mother was a widow with 2 or 3 children, and his father married her in Lebanon. He was just a young man, the father, and my father was in the second family. So Sam Kasseri, who was a supplier here for the pack peddlers, was his half-brother. But it happened that he was also related to me on his wife's side. Sam Kasseri's wife was my grandmother's first cousin. I just figured he was a first cousin.
I think you told me he come at the age of 20. Does that sound
Well,
right?
I don't think he was 20. I think he was more like
Younger than
17 or 18 when he came.
And when did your mother come over?
My mother came, her parents came, I think they had 1 or 2 children. They came from Lebanon to Lowell, Massachusetts. They didn't come here to Iowa. They were in Lowell, Massachusetts. And she remained back with her grandmother, her father's mother, who was just very, very upset that the family left. So they left my mother with her for 3 or 4 years. So when my mother came, she was about 5 or 6 when she came to Lowell, Massachusetts. And then when she was about 22, her grandmother was here on her mother's side, here in Cedar Rapids with her sister. And her grandmother sent for her and wrote to her and told her that she had a nice young man in mind for her. My mother was 22, which was kind of an old maid in those days. So she got on the train in Lowell, Massachusetts, and came to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And 3 weeks later, she married my father.
Mary, do you remember your grandparents?
Oh, my, yes. Oh, by the way, I have a picture of them that I didn't give you. Would you like me to get it now?
Yes, I would. Mary, which one is your mother in that photograph?
My mother is standing in the back row, and she's on the left. And this picture, I think, was taken in 1926 here in Cedar Rapids.
That would have made her about 30-some years old.
I think so. And 1926, and the little boy in white would be the same age as I was at that time.
And the photograph on the right over there, is that your mother's folks?
My mother's mother and father in Lowell, Massachusetts, and my grandmother's brother is on her right, and his fiancée is next to him. The sad part of it is he died a year or 2 after that picture was taken, so he was never married. I don't know which of the children the little baby was, but that is my grandmother, Alexandra, maternal grandmother, her brother, and his fiancée at that time in Lowell, Massachusetts. My mother would probably have been in the old country yet.
Mary, did you have any brothers and sisters?
Oh, yes. There were 6 of us, and I was the oldest. There was one born before me who died before I was born. And then I'm the eldest. And are we showing a picture?
Not right at the moment.
Not right now.
How old, or what was their names, your brothers and sisters?
My brother next to me was Michael, And then there was Matilda and Catherine and Eugene and Floyd.
Are any of them still living?
They're all living, thank God.
And you're the oldest.
And I'm the oldest.
Was there quite an age difference between you?
No, just a couple
You're
of years. The first three were just 2 years apart. And then there was a lapse of about 4 years, and then the two boys were born.
Mary, what year do you suppose this photograph was taken in then?
I believe it was 1943.
Very nice. Mary, what was your dad's occupation when he first come to this country then?
Well, he didn't have an occupation. He was just a young fellow, and he came to his brother, who was the supplier for the peddlers here. His name was Sam Casseri. That was his, as I told you, his half-brother, and then related to the wife, too. And I can tell you a little bit about what the pack peddlers were like.
Okay. We have a couple of pictures up here of typical pack peddlers.
I have a little excerpt from Elixa Naff's book about the pack peddlers that I can read to you.
Okay.
She writes, "The most fundamental factor in the assimilation of Lebanese in America was pack peddling. Those who ventured first, it seems, were courageous men and women of steel determination who trudged along the country roads of Iowa, laden like beasts of burden. A heavy suitcase strapped to the back, a kashishi to the chest." A kashishi was a small suitcase. And one satchel in each hand was the typical portrait of a pack peddler. Even after they had tested its realities in America, tasted its loneliness, and suffered its hazards, most still, on the whole, preferred pack peddling to the drudgery of the factory, as well as the isolation of American life in the days before the automobile. The American farm life before the days of the automobile, providing a first-hand, close-up introduction of American life. It served as a window to new ideas and values, tested the Lebanese's inclination to return to the homeland, raised their expectations, and improved their skills. The basic virtues of pack peddling were many. Immigrants could learn immediately the language. It required no real advanced training, capital, or language skills, and it suited their individualistic nature. In short, it allowed them to operate on their own terms. Moreover, it spared them the uncertainties of finding work, of long job lines, and of layoffs. Yet, pack peddling entailed a radical change in the way they earned their livelihood. But its scope and nature, the demands on the peddlers' physical and psychological resources, and the way it would irrevocably reorient their lives, these they had not anticipated.
Mary, the suppliers, like the supplier your dad worked for, were the suppliers more or less kind of responsible for these young people when they would come? They would look after them and line them up with jobs and places to sleep and...
Well, they wouldn't be able to go into that much detail about the jobs and places to sleep, but my uncle was a supplier. And he was the person who provided them with a home base and merchandise to sell. The supplier would make trips by train to Chicago and New York and buy his merchandise. Now, my uncle had 2 storerooms on 12th Avenue Southeast. Let me tell you a little about that from Elixa Naff's book. The supplier would go to, as I said, Chicago or New York to get his supplies, and he would meet potential peddlers in Chicago and New York on their arrival. And he would bring them back to Cedar Rapids and start them peddling. He would sell them merchandise on credit as well. Suitable places to establish peddling settlements were bountiful, as Nassiff writes. Railroads had opened up vast areas, and during that period, the population of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, expanded from about 10,000, to 25,000. Suppliers proliferated, and eager would-be peddlers were arriving in droves. My uncle, Sam Casseri, was one of the suppliers, with 2 store buildings. They were recently torn down, and they had large living quarters at the back. And on the 2nd floor, there was an apartment where he and his family lived. Both buildings had apartments to the rear, and this is where the new peddlers could stay. He housed many young men in the back apartments. My father, his brother, was one of them. By the turn of the century, emboldened young men had covered the Midwest in a network of peddling settlements. Now, surprisingly, most were located in the populous eastern and middle western states, Iowa included. There was an article in the Gazette that was very interesting on March 9th, 1897, and in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I think it had a different name then. And this was the article. It said, and I quote, "It is a fact not generally known that Cedar Rapids now has a fair-sized colony of genuine Arabians, and is being augmented rapidly and bids fair to become a feature of our cosmopolitan population. In a storeroom at 1920 South 3rd Street, Tom Bashara, and later my uncle, Sam Casseri, by the way, the recognized head of the colony, sells a large mixture of American and foreign goods, including all the articles that peddlers carry in their packs. Several of the party had only been in this country a few months, and all were good friends." End of article.
So this must have been quite a lucrative business.
Well, I think
Peddling.
it gave them a start,
Mm-hmm.
gave the peddlers a start. And as I quoted a few moments ago, they didn't have to really know the language yet. They could sign language to the farmers' wives, and they carried in their packs things that the farmers' wives really wanted and needed. Merchandise like clothing, yard goods, sewing equipment, and that kind of thing that the farm wives really were interested in buying.
So it was mostly in the country where they would do this.
Only
peddling.
the country. And she goes on to say, training for the road was minimal. Besides, most newcomers were impatient. They had come to make money quickly and to return home, or begin small stores or other kinds of business. They were eager to get on with it. Within a day or two, someone put a kashishi in their hands and took them out for their first day's earning. Veteran peddlers, usually kinsmen, were generous with their advice. Simple physical comforts were constantly pressing: hunger and cold, fatigue, and a place to sleep. Throats parched from the dust and the heat of the roads, blistered feet, wet clothes that clung, cold and clammy, to the skin in the winter. They talked of icicles forming on mustaches, of women's frozen skirts slashing cold ankles, because women did go with a relative on the road with a suitcase. Men forced to sleep in their buggies, who froze to death. Of buggies mired in the mud, this is when they went from walking on foot to having a horse and buggy. Sleep and weather were companion problems. If the weather was tolerable, many slept in the open. When they did, it was often necessary to conceal themselves from stray animals and thieves, not always successful. If they were in or near a town where facilities were available, they slept in boarding houses. But on the country roads, they sought lodging in farmhouses or slept outdoors. From farmhouse to farmhouse, often miles apart, they knocked on doors, made the sleep gesture, and prayed openly to be let in like this. Farmers were frequently sympathetic, but as frequently, the peddlers were turned away by a suspicious few who carried guns and had barking dogs.
Compared to our life, that was not an easy life, was it?
No, it wasn't. And I would like to say, gradually the pack peddler acquired a horse and wagon, and the days of trudging over the roads on foot were over. In 1914, the first Orthodox church in Iowa was built, and the immigrants, and it still stands today, on the corner of 12th Avenue and 10th Street Southeast.
Mary, thank you for telling us the story of the Lebanese, the peddling. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood growing up in Cedar Rapids, Mary. Were all of your brothers and sisters living at home at the same time?
Yes.
They were.
Yes, they were.
Did the family speak Arabic at home? Or?
My mother didn't, but my father did.
Mm-hmm. Did they teach the children how to speak Arabic?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really. We just kind of assimilated words here and there,
Mm-hmm.
but we never really spoke to each other in Arabic. We were going to school and had friends that were in and out of the house. You know, we were all different ages. I was born in the end of 1917, and the youngest child was born in I can't think really fast
okay.
right now.
That's okay.
My youngest brother was, I was taking care of him when I was 12,
Mm-hmm.
or so.
You were talking about the neighborhood children coming in into your home. Was there any discrimination in the neighborhood towards the
Not at all.
Lebanese or Syrian
No,
people?
because we went to school in the southeast side of town where there were many Czech children, and there were some black children, and so it was a diverse group of people. There was something I wanted to say about that. What was it? Oh, I know what it was. My girlfriend was quite taken aback by something that I was eating, and she told her mother, at the Slamans they eat sour milk. It was yogurt, but they had never heard of it. No one in this country had ever heard of it, but we had yogurt. Of course, now everybody has yogurt.
Was that one of the favorite dishes of the Lebanese people?
Yes, I mean, we had yogurt just the way you have it today, as a side, to other foods. And we have a salad we make with yogurt, where we dice cucumbers and mint.
Mm-hmm. Was your folks religious people?
Yes, as far as most people go. They went to church every Sunday. And then at our church, when I was growing up, there was a custom that everybody went home and had dinner after church. And then, after the women had taken care of the kitchen and so forth, everybody went back to the church about 1:30, 2 o'clock, and they had cake and coffee.
This would be on Sunday.
On Sunday afternoon, they spent Sunday afternoon together in the church hall. Everybody went back to the church. And you see, people lived close to the church then. One day, not long ago, I was thinking about that, and I counted about 14 or 15 families that lived within 2 blocks or 3 blocks from the church.
So the parishioners pretty much lived in the same neighborhood.
The same neighborhood.
They were probably very close.
Yes.
As far as church and church activities was concerned. What was your biggest holy day in the church?
Easter.
Easter?
Yes.
Could you explain to me what's your Easter, how you celebrated it, starting on Friday up until Sunday?
Well,
That's
it really
very
started
interesting.
40 days before
Yes, I understand that.
Lent, and we were supposed to fast from all animal foods, products, meat, milk, cheese, eggs, you know. Now, the older people did very religiously, but I think the children just fasted from meat, usually the 40 days of Lent. And then the last week, Holy Week, was very important. There was a special church service each night until Friday, which was Good Friday.
Good Friday.
And we had what we would call a burial service for Jesus. And there was a bier. You know what I mean by that? It was like a coffin,
Yes.
completely covered with flowers, that was carried around the church by 4 people, you know, 2 people at each end of what would be like a coffin, and the coffin was covered with flowers. The women had done that during the day. And then and today we do it, the same thing. We go outside the church and process all around the churchyard with all the parishioners that wish to follow, with the priest and the censors and the choir singing a dirge, because it's a funeral. And they process all around the churchyard 3 times and then go back into the church. And where we are now on Cottage Grove Avenue, we've had people going by in cars, probably very young people, because this is midnight, toot their horns at these strange people parading around the churchyard. But then we go back into the church, and that's our Good Friday service.
Then Holy Saturday.
And Holy Saturday, there's a church service at midnight. At midnight, it starts at 11, and we have the liturgy. We call it a liturgy because this service is sung and chanted by the priest and the choir. And at just before midnight, everyone leaves the church and goes out in front. The priest leading them, the choir, the chanters, everybody's outside the church. The church is dark. One person stays in the church, and usually people that are infirm. But this one person stays inside, right inside the closed doors. And the priest goes up to the door and pounds on the door and says, "Who is in the tomb?" And the person inside says, "Christ is risen." And he flings open the doors, and all the church lights go on, and everybody files back into the church, the priest and the chanters leading, and the choir following, singing our Easter song, which is "Christ is risen, trampling down death by death, and on those in the tomb bestowing life." And it has a beautiful melody. And they sing that as everybody files back into the lighted church and takes their seats. And that's Easter morning. And then we have our Easter service then. So it isn't over till about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we don't have another service on Sunday. That is the Easter service when the tomb was opened, you know.
You were telling me about the old tradition then on Sunday afternoons.
That comes next.
Okay.
Sunday afternoon then, we've already had our Sunday liturgy early in the morning. So Sunday afternoon, everyone dresses in their Easter finery and go back to the church. And we call it an agape service, A-G-A-P-E, which means love. It's a love service. And the description of the risen Lord is read in as many languages as we have people in the church that can speak them. And they usually speak from the balcony, and we have someone, maybe French and Russian, Greek, Spanish, whoever we have in the church that can read the lesson in another language, as many languages as we have. And then when people go out, they file up, and the priest has a huge basket of red-colored Easter eggs, and everybody takes an egg. And when we go out, the young people and the children crack eggs. One person holds an egg, and the other person takes his egg and taps it. He holds the egg between his finger and thumb, and the other person comes up, and whichever one cracks the other egg gets the egg. So the kids collect eggs. And years ago, they don't do it anymore, but the men would go around to the houses after the church service, and they knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and say, "Christ is risen," and the answer is, "He is truly risen." That's the answer. He is truly risen. And then the housewife has a huge display of sweets. And then they go to the next house. And the women try to outdo each other in the sweets. They don't go around. They have to stay in the home. And then the young people, the teenagers, go around in a group. And they come in on a house. And they sample the sweets and go on to the next house. And so every house is visited by a group, either the men or the young people, and then later in the day, relatives would visit each other. I would go to my sisters, or my sisters would come to me, or my brothers would come to my house. But it would be family time then.
When you were a young girl, Mary, was it mandatory that the women wear headgear?
It was when I was very young, and then it gradually disappeared. We wore scarves. The women wore scarves, and then that disappeared.
And also, was the liturgy sung or the prayer said? Was it in Arabic or English when you were
Well,
young?
when I was growing up, it was in Arabic, and it finally came to pass, and we were all very happy that it was in English. And Orthodox churches all over the world use the same liturgy that was written, are you ready? In 354. And we use the same liturgy today. Originally, it was about 3 hours long. Now it's 1 hour. Nothing's been added, only there has been changes in the length. But in all churches now, the language of the country is used, Orthodox churches. If you go to a Greek Orthodox church in this town, it's in English. And in my church, it's in English.
Was Christmas a big holiday?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Do you remember any special Christmases when you think back?
Well, they were just very American Christmases. We hung our stockings.
Could your dad afford to give you gifts?
Yes, they always did. He had a grocery store when I was growing up. In fact, he built a brick building that still stands on the corner of 12th Avenue and 15th Street. And we lived next door. We moved there when I was about 6 years of age. He had a store before that at another location, same area. And then he had this brick store built, and he rented it out to a Czech family of men who had a grocery store. Their name was Zacher, the Zacher brothers. And we lived next door. But he remained in his store about a block away, just a block away.
Was there any Lebanese traditions that was carried on at Christmas time in your home? Like, would you have a particular meal at Christmas time or on Christmas Eve?
No, we were very American at Christmas. We had a Christmas tree, and we hung our stockings. And there was always an orange in the stocking. And I remember my mother used to go to Sanford's. It was kind of like a department store downtown, and she bought all our toys there because my father had some things in his store, wholesale, that he would buy wholesale.
Was your mother a good cook?
Absolutely marvelous.
Yeah.
She made the most beautiful pies I've ever seen. And she would make pie crusts, maybe 7 or 8, and stack them up in her cupboard, just the crust. And of course she used lard in those days. But she was a marvelous cook.
What was your favorite dish when you think back what she used to
I love
pick for you?
banana pie.
Banana pie.
I love that.
At Christmas time, did you have a midnight liturgy?
I don't think so.
What other big events in the church? Was baptisms and
Oh, my.
weddings, large events?
Yes, weddings, baptisms. Yes, baptisms especially. A child was baptized at about 40 days. Parents were chosen that were lifelong godparents, you know.
They played a very significant role in the child's life.
The godparents play a very, very special role in the life of a child. They were always chosen as best friends and sometimes young relatives, you know, uncles or aunts.
You had mentioned that your mother's marriage was prearranged. In your young days when you were a teenager, was this still a tradition for marriages to be prearranged?
No, not any more than it is today in any family, you know, in an American family.
What about inter-ethnic marriages or inter-religious marriages? Were they frowned on by the...
They weren't exactly frowned on at all, really. I know many people my age married non-Orthodox church people and non-Lebanese people.
Did the church have any youth groups to keep the youth active within the church?
Very active youth group, very active. The youth groups were very special, and the Sunday school was very special. We always had Sunday school, and we had pre-Sunday school for the 3 and 4-year-olds. And it's organized by the national Archbishop in New York. We have our Archbishop in New York City, and from there we get all the Sunday school equipment and literature and the youth. There's a very strong youth organization in the church.
Wasn't there a group organization by the name of Soyo?
That's it.
That's it. Did your dad have an auto when you were young, automobile?
Yes, he had a Ford, a black Ford.
Do you ever remember?
I remember that because on Sundays he used to take us for a ride every Sunday afternoon after we came from the church, and he would go out Mount Vernon Road, way out Mount Vernon Road and back, and that was the country, you know. That was real country after about, I'd say, 18th Street or so.
Do you remember the seedling mile, the first mile of pavement they put? I think it was probably about 6 miles out of east of Cedar Rapids.
Oh, I wasn't terribly conscious of that.
Between Cedar Rapids and Mount Vernon.
I don't remember that too well. Okay. But then the other place where he'd take us for a ride was out what we call Center Point Road. And the springs were there. You know, where the spring house is? McLeod Springs were there. And we would go down the banking and gather watercress in the summer. The watercress was on the springs. And we would gather watercress, and my mother would use it for salads.
Was a big Sunday dinner traditional?
Oh, yes.
What would your mother prepare?
Mostly Lebanese food. But she was a very good cook. Many times she had what everybody does on Sunday, usually in those days, a roast, you know, a roast dinner with potatoes and vegetables and gravy. And just the usual Sunday dinner that you would have. And then we'd always add a Lebanese dish or two to that.
I had in my research that the Lebanese and the Syrian people were a very generous and very hospitable people, that they would very readily invite people into their homes. And
Rarely?
Very, not very rarely, very often invite.
Well, I'll tell you what I remember about that. As I said, I lived on 12th Avenue from when I was 6 until we moved, and I was 17 when I moved. And we lived on across from the church, 12th Avenue and 10th Street, 15th Street where the house was. And in those days, there would be what we called hobos or tramps, and we weren't that far from the railroad tracks. You couldn't see the railroad, but I mean, it was like a half a mile away. And we had what we called a summer kitchen at the back of the house. They called them summer kitchens. I think the women used to have a stove there, In the summer, they could bake and cook in that summer kitchen. And evidently, they had the address of my parents down where the tracks were, because we had hobos all summer that would come up and knock on the back door of the summer kitchen, and my mother would have them sit. She'd take a stool out there for them to sit on, and she'd give them a meal. And she knew that the house number was marked because they came so often, and I can see them eating in the summer kitchen. She didn't have them in the house, you know, where the kitchen was, but she had them out there.
Did the Depression hurt your dad, Mary?
Very badly. Very, very.
In what?
It was the worst.
He was running a store at this time?
He had a large store, and I remember when we were going to move from that house, he lost the house and the brick building, and we moved to Oakland Avenue. There was a big empty house there. It must have had 5 or 6 bedrooms. I hated the second floor because 2 or 3 of the bedrooms weren't used, and I thought they were haunted. I hated that. It's such a big, sprawling house. It's still there. And I remember my father and mother, when they were moving from the store, putting an incinerator. There was an incinerator behind the store. And they took, you remember the little charge books, where if you bought on credit, you charged, and they took basket of those charge books out in the back and burned them the day we were leaving. And I can just see them throwing those charge books in the incinerator and burning them up because the people couldn't pay. And that was it. We were moving to another northeast, Oakland Road Northeast, and they burned all those books. And you can imagine the money that was in those books. And they lost the brick store and the house, and we moved and rented this store. And he rented a store on the corner of Center Point Road, and I think it was Oakland Avenue. Across the street from it is a county brick building now, some kind of a health building. But he opened a store there, and he had to use my mother's name because he was bankrupt. He had to sign bankruptcy. And they had a store there for a number of years.
Where did young Mary go to grade school?
Tyler School.
Tyler. And then high school?
McKinley.
McKinley?
And Washington.
Did you graduate from McKinley?
We were the first class to leave Washington High School downtown and go over to McKinley. It was made a high school. And we were the first class that made that transition on our side of town. And then they tore Washington down. You know.
Do you have any memories of old Washington?
Oh, yes, I do. The one I had was that I was excused from gym because I had what they called leakage of the heart. And I was supposed to go across the street to the YW and play ping pong. Once a week at least, I would have a quarter and I would go to a tea room where on 3rd Avenue. It's all stores now. It was a tea room on 3rd Avenue. When you faced the river, it was on the right. I would go to Lewis's Tea Room and have a grilled cheese sandwich and a cup of tea for 15 cents. The sandwich I had 50 cents, 2 quarters. The sandwich was 15 cents, the tea was 10. And then I'd cross the street to the Paramount Theater and see a movie. And then I would walk home to Center Point Road. And I did that at least once a week.
You could not take gym because you had a heart murmur, but it was okay for you to walk home on Center Point Road.
Or I got the bus. The streetcar.
Did your mother know that you would visit the tea room instead of going to...
No.
She did?
No one knew.
You had...
in Washington High School, yes. I guess we were the first class that went to McKinley. And McKinley became a high school then for our last year.
So you probably didn't go out for any sports. Did you have any extracurricular? Did you take dancing or anything?
I took ballet on my own a little later. When I was 16, I started with a ballet school downtown, and 15, and I took ballet lessons for years.
Did that?
Even after I was married and had children, I still took ballet lessons.
Did you ever put on any performances?
No, I didn't get that far. Oh yes, we had performances, but that was when I was an adult from that same school.
You were telling me that you gave readings.
Oh yes, when I was 14 years old.
Was this your
15,
idea,
16.
or did somebody else think you would?
Well, the school where I went to take ballet lessons, they had what they called elocution lessons too. And I was taking those. And they sent me out from the school. I have a little book here now with the names of the towns where I went. And I gave what they called readings. They were 5-6 pages long at clubs, and mostly women's clubs.
Did you ever attend a Chautauqua event, or did you ever know about Chautauqua?
My family went to the original Chautauqua after I was married and had children. And that's another subject. The original Chautauqua is in lower western New York State, the original Chautauqua, that was founded by Sunday school teachers. And it evolved into a very, very wonderful world. And when my sons were married and had lived in Pittsburgh, they bought a hotel in Chautauqua, and that St. Elmo was called. And they had that hotel for 10 years or more. And we would go there every summer for 3 months. And then we would go at New Year's, over New Year's holiday, and meet other friends who would go at New Year's time. And they still do that.
Did you attend any Chautauqua events in Iowa?
No.
Never did. Okay.
No, the original Chautauqua had 72 classes, college classes. They had a 7,000-seat amphitheater outdoors, and they had many, many old houses. Each of my sons had a house there. They still do. They each have a house there yet that they rent out.
Did you ever have the opportunity to go to Green's Opera House in Cedar Rapids?
I went once when it was a movie theater. I saw a movie there once, and then it was torn down. I don't know what year that was. I must have been 16, 17 years old.
What year did you graduate from McKinley, Mary?
39.
39. Did you have any ambitions what you wanted to do with your life? Or
Not really.
young people, did they have many options back then once they left school?
Oh, I don't think I graduated in 39. What year was it? I have the graduation picture, but
That's okay. So what did you do after high school?
well, I was engaged in 1936, and I was married in 37, so that took care of that.
Yeah. So you were engaged then when you were in high school?
Yes, and for 2 years. And I was married in August 1937, and my son was born in August 1938.
Mm-hmm. And who did you marry?
Samuel Nassiff.
Did he have a job at the time?
Yes, he was a salesman on the road, just like the pack peddlers had been, but he carried Oriental rugs, and he was what you might call a supplier, because he had maybe 20 young men in cars who bought rugs from him. He had a warehouse on 7th Street Southeast. See what it would have been, where the big medical building is now. What's that called? IPC building,
PCI.
the big medical building
Mhm.
across from the
Yeah,
post
yeah.
office. Well, he had a store building there, and the rugs would be shipped in, and the men would come in their cars and load up, and then I would ship rugs all over the Middle West.
You worked in the business too.
Yes,
Mhm.
because he wasn't home. He would go out for 3-4 weeks at a time.
And you would take care of all the bookwork back home.
The bookwork and shipping the rugs out. I had a man that helped wrap the rugs.
What would they call your order, or call their orders back into you?
Yes,
How big of an area would they have covered?
they went as far as Oklahoma south, as far as Missoula, Montana west, in their cars. And we would ship the rugs ahead. I had 2 men that worked, and my husband had rental property that we rented out. We had a beautiful building on First Avenue and 8th Street across from the Masonic Library. It's a large building there.
So would they carry all this money around with them until they got
They'd
back
send
to
it back
Cedar?
to me. They sent the cashier's checks and money orders back to me. I can show you one of the books.
I would like to see that. This was a typical list of entries that rugs that were.
Yes, this is the kind of book I kept, and this is a carbon copy. And this man came, this is a list of the men. Now, I'd like to show you what a typical order would be like. This is a typical order. Let's see, maybe there's another one here. It says here, George Taylor at Wichita. So these goods, this merchandise was shipped to him to Wichita, Kansas. It was an order of, he owed at that time, the order was $271.
Did you ever recall any of your salesmen having a problem of being robbed or carrying around that money?
No,
Never-
they usually
never
stayed
did.
at the same hotel. There might be 3 or 4 of them together, and they would go out and come back to the hotel at night, unless they went far enough that they had to stay wherever they ended up that day.
These Oriental rugs that we speak of, what type of material and where have they been made?
They were from Belgium, most of them, shipped in from Belgium, but they weren't original. They weren't handmade. They were machine-made.
What type of material would they be made out of?
Well, I suppose cotton and jute, just like that little rug over there.
Who would have been their prime customers? Farm families?
Farm people.
Yeah.
They called on farmers, and sometimes in small towns, and the women were very happy on farms because the rugs came to them, and they could choose what they wanted. They had rugs that were 9 by 12 or 8 by 10, 4 by 6, 2 by 4, and then they had tapestries, wall tapestries that they could put over their sofas, and small tapestries that they could hang on the wall.
I would imagine in a farmhouse, especially in the wintertime, the floors would be very cold, and one of these rugs would make quite a difference.
Oh yes, and they were colorful. They were beautiful. They
Brighten up the home a little bit.
Yes, they would look like the handmade rugs that would go into thousands of dollars.
Was there a lot of different patterns for them to choose from? or
Oh
were they-
yes, yes, many different patterns.
How about competition? Did you have?
I don't think so. When they were spread out into the country, the only competition they would have would be that a store in that area that sold rugs, might think. But they were in farms. They called on farms that really were far out from the cities, were isolated.
How long? I can imagine. Could the salesmen? Could they make a decent living doing
Oh,
that?
I think so. And they were not many of them were married at that time. Most of them are not married. And then when they did get married, and then the war, they settled down with a family and usually went into a business of some kind. But you see, the war came along. World War II came along, and many of these boys were drafted. We had over 150 boys from our small church that were in the armed services.
Did gas rationing, did that affect their amount of mileage they could?
It exterminated.
So that was the end of the
That's the end of that. When the gas rationing came in, many of the boys joined the service, and they couldn't get gas anyway. The gas was rationed. So it was over. It was over when the war started.
So what did your husband go into then?
By that time, he had rental properties, and I took care of those.
And how long, what year did your husband pass away?
1962.
Yeah. And did you kind of take over the business
Yes.
for him there?
Yes, I did. I took care of the property, and much of it was sold. In fact, it was all sold eventually.
Mary, was you blessed with any children, you and
Yes.
your husband? Mm-hmm.
3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
What is the names of the boys?
The boys, the oldest is Joseph, and his brother Nathan, and the little girl is Catherine, spelled Catherine, Catherine Alexandra.
Mary, were you active in the community?
Oh yes, I've always been active in the community.
Like you were telling me that you were very active when the boys were in radio programs.
Oh yes, the eldest boy had a radio show once a week that he was in.
What was his name?
He's Joseph.
Joseph.
I don't, Toby and Susie, I think, was the name of it. But he was on every Saturday, and he did that. And then he was in community theater plays, 2 or 3 of them when he was growing up. Nathan was also in 2 or 3 community theater plays. And I taught for, I think, about 7 or 8 years a creative dramatics class. I'd forgotten about that. And Nathan and Kathy both were in that class. We held the classes at St. Paul's Church, and then at the, I think we also, at the public library, they had a room for us, and we taught those classes once a week. There was a woman named Winifred Ward, Dr. Winifred Ward, and she was from Northwestern University in Chicago. And she's the woman that wrote the book, Creative Dramatics for Children. And she established this group here. And there was another lady and I that had classes. We did that for 7 or 8 years, taught children once a week. Creative dramatics.
Did you ever do anything with the community theater?
I didn't, because it required being there every night, for several weeks before a play. But both boys were in community theater plays.
You were telling me about a friendship forum.
Oh, yes, I'd forgotten about that. That was formed after the war, and there were 5 or 6 ladies on the panel. I was the moderator, and we had a Jewish lady, a black lady, a Catholic lady, Protestant lady, and I don't know if there's a 5th or not, but we appeared before clubs, and they asked questions of these young ladies, and I was the moderator.
Seminole Valley, didn't you work with the Seminole Valley?
Oh, yes, I worked there for several years, too. When they were it was just in its infancy. I remember going there every week and helping to decorate the house and just doing whatever needed to be done there. And then I was there at certain times, I think it was once a week, when visitors would come, I would be a guide. That's what I was, a guide.
I think you were telling me that you belonged to the ladies' club, the PEO.
Yes, PEO, I belong to that. It's a sisterhood, and we sponsor women in colleges, women who are in need of funds for college. We have 5 different funds that we sponsor to educate older women advanced that are beyond their college.
There is a saying that the PEO is not a secret.
Oh, it's definitely secret.
It's not a secret organization. It's an organization with a secret.
That's it. That's it. I got a little mixed up there when I'm talking about the grants. These are women that need funds for advanced training.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, many of them are foreign, are here, just to get their educations. But we have 5 different funds that we have. And I used to think that PO, before I joined, meant Protestant Educational Organization. And I found out I was wrong.
Any other?
Well, I'm proud to say I belong to the Wednesday Shakespeare Club that was founded in 1895 by a group of women to study Shakespeare. And we meet 2 Wednesdays a month, the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. We study 2 plays a year, one in the fall from September to January, and a play from January to May. And we have a leader who's chosen, and she leads the reading and the discussion. All Shakespeare plays have 5 acts. So we study an act for each meeting, and that takes up 5, the fall months, 5 acts. And one of the members is chosen to give a special report at each meeting. And there's a leader that's chosen for that particular play for the fall and one for the spring. And it's the leader's responsibility to conduct the meeting and to choose a member to give a special report at each meeting. So we have 5 reports, one for each act, and we have 22 members. I think it's 22 or 23 member limit. In PEO, there's no limit to the membership, but in Shakespeare Club there is. And it is my pride and joy.
That's
I
nice,
love Shakespeare. Yeah. And then the other club I belong to is called the Tourist Club, which should be renamed because originally they met and talked about trips, but now it's a book club. And we meet and a book is reviewed each time. Tourist Club. And I think the membership is again limited to about 25 women. And we meet in homes. So that's why the membership is limited. PEO, also we meet in homes, but sometimes we can go to a facility that will take care of more people.
Mary, did you or any of your family's members ever get the opportunity to visit Lebanon?
Yes, my husband and son and my father went to Lebanon in 1959. There was a special, very special event there in the Middle East. Too bad those days aren't back. But they were part of a convention of 250 people. And they started in Egypt, and they went to 5 different countries and were recognized and entertained by the head of the country, be he a king or a president. They went to Egypt, and the king at that time entertained them. Then they went, this is a motorcade. There were 250 people. And then they went to Jordan, and the king entertained them there. They went to Syria, and they ended up in Lebanon. And it was a magnificent trip. They were there, I think it was 6 weeks. And then my son, when it was over, went on to, he celebrated his 21st birthday in the little village in Lebanon where his father was born. And he went on his own to Greece and Rome and London. That was his 21st birthday present, and then came home.
Mary, your family and the Nassiff family had a large reunion every year, didn't they?
Yes.
Would you hold that book up there for Ellen to... It says a benevolence convention. Was this a social function, or was it a family gathering, or both?
It was both. And there were 9 conventions after the first one. They weren't always every year. So I have 9 books like this. Each convention had a book like this. And there are pictures of members that were the officers and the people that were taking care of different facets of the entertainment and the study. And I have a picture of one of the conventions.
This was a typical group setting?
Yes,
Mary?
It was. This was Ellis Park.
Mm-hmm. Was this all relatives, or did you...
Relatives and close friends. Not very many friends. Most of them were relatives that had come to Ellis Park, and we had a long weekend celebration. The white-haired gentleman there, he was from... He was the ambassador to the United States from Lebanon.
And then the gentleman to his left in the black, would that have been your pastor? Or?
Yes, that's the priest.
And then to his left, would that have been a visitor? You had mentioned a Mr. Ayase Bill.
Would be on his right.
Our left, his right.
Yeah. Okay. Would he have been of the Greek Orthodox faith, or would he?
Bill Ayase. He was a Muslim. He was a Muslim from the mosque, and he was invited as a guest.
Very nice.
It kind of showed our relationship with the mosque and its members. We have always been very friendly and have celebrated each other's holidays. And when there are special events, not holidays, but events at the mosque or at our church, we do patronize each other.
Mary, I noticed on your brochure here it says benevolent. Was this group, were they responsible for helping college students or somebody that would want to further their education?
Yes, they did that. And also, they were very beneficial to the village in Lebanon, where they put in a water system. They also put in electricity, and they subsidized the school and the church, just whatever's needed from year to year. It was a benevolent society. That's what was done with the funds.
Do they still have this event?
It isn't we're no longer active, just in thought, really.
Kind of like
everyone sort of takes care of their own there.
Mary, tell us about your family. What are they doing today?
Well, I'll tell you, we're all in education. My older son, Joe, is a full professor, and he's been at the college where he is now for 20-some years, and he is now in administrative job there. And he was supposed to retire 2 years ago, but they kept him on as an administrator, and he does just one play a year. He's probably directed 1,000 plays in his lifetime. He's a full professor, and he's going to move to Cedar Rapids. He bought a home here already, just a few blocks from where I live, and he'll be back sometime this coming year to live. He's always wanted to come back to Cedar Rapids. He's traveled extensively, but he wants to be back in Iowa. And the second son, Nathan, as a boy, was a magician. And he still goes to the hospital in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where he's a professor at the University of South Dakota. And he goes to the hospital once a month and gives a magic show for the people that are ambulatory and can come to where he's doing his show. And I should go back to Joe. He has 2 children, a boy and girl. The boy is married in Denver with my darling great-grandson, and his daughter lives where he does in Florida, Winter Park, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando, and she has a little boy. So he has a son and daughter. My son Nathan lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, teaches at the university, and has a son and daughter who are not married. The boy is in New York City, and the girl is in Pittsburgh, where she grew up. Both boys lived in Pittsburgh for 20-some years, raised their families in Pittsburgh, and owned the hotel in Chautauqua, New York, which was only 3 hours away, and they operated that for 10, 12 years, and then sold it. And they each have a home in Chautauqua where they go in the summer. It's still a very thriving community, Chautauqua, New York. And Kathy is also a professor of English literature. She has taught at Coe and at University of Iowa and at Cornell. And she has 4 children that are keeping her very, very busy now. She's extremely active, magnificent cook. I don't know anyone that can cook like she does for vast numbers of people. And should I say anything else about her now? She has 4 children, 3 boys, and her daughter's the oldest, and she is in her 2nd year of medical school at the University of Iowa. And the 3 boys, one is at Loras College, one at Coe, and the youngest boy, Alexander, who is the pride of my life, is a junior at Washington High School, and his name is Alexander.
The grandchildren, their names?
Yes, my son Joe has Alexis, and really Alexandra, but we call her Alexis or Lexi, and her husband Todd. Her name is McGargy, Todd McGargy, and she has little Will, grandson, and they live in Florida. Now his son, Jonathan, lives in Denver. His wife is Laurie. She's from the Chautauqua area originally. She is a very fine photographer, and she and her husband have published a book on Chautauqua. I don't have a copy right now. Someone borrowed the last of 3, and I've forgotten who it was, so I don't have the Chautauqua book. But she's a photographer, and they published this book together. He wrote the introduction and the text, and she took the photographs. And they have a little baby, 2.5 years old, whose name is Sam. We have another Sam. And then, as I told you, Nathan's children are not married yet. We're looking for that, looking forward to that. And Kathy, I told you about her children, I think. Yes.
Did you have a reunion this summer, Mary?
Yes, we did. My family, my Federa George family, that is my maternal grandmother and grandfather and their children. We had almost 60 people here in August, the first week of August. It was a beautiful, beautiful affair. We had people from Washington State, from Texas, from the East, from Ohio, from Illinois, and Texas. Did I say that? Texas. So we had 60 or 70 people here for a week, and we had wonderful things planned, and we had meals together and get-togethers, and we had a big Saturday night in our church hall, and it was lovely. We took many, many pictures, and then a few days later, everybody went back where they came from. But it was a very memorable time.
Very nice. Mary, unless you have any other memories you want to share with us, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society, would like to thank you very, very much for talking with us.
I feel very honored, very special and very honored that you've chosen me. And I hope I can be of some help at the History Center.
Thank you.
Thank you.